Most people use touchscreens hundreds of times every day. Phones and tablets and conference room panels, interactive displays, self-checkout kiosks, ATMs, restaurant ordering systems, vehicle dashboards, and airport terminals all rely on touchscreen technology. It's become so common that we rarely stop to think about it. And today I'm Nomadic IT, and while out here in the yard, let's talk about how a touchscreen actually knows where you touched it. Because when you really stop to think about it, touchscreens are a little ridiculous. We all just accepted this magic trick without asking many questions. You walk up to a sheet of glass, you poke it with your finger, and somehow it knows exactly what you meant. Not approximately, not somewhere in the general area. It often knows within fractions of an inch exactly where your finger landed. If somebody showed that technology to a person in 1985, they'd probably assume it was like science fiction or witchcraft. And yet most of us use it hundreds of times every day without giving it a second thought. So how does it work? The answer starts with electricity. More specifically, electric fields. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to turn this into a physics lecture. Nobody's getting homework today unless you want it. But there is one important concept we need to understand. Electricity doesn't always travel through wires. Conductive materials also create invisible electric fields around them. Those fields exist whether we can see them or not. And your body just so happens to be conductive. And that's the secret. Your finger isn't pressing a button. Your finger is interacting with an electric field. Now let's look at what's actually inside a modern touchscreen. Most people think they're touching the display itself. You're not. You're touching several layers that sit on top of the display. The outermost layer is usually glass. Beneath that is a transparent, especially thin, transparent layer of conductive material, often something called indium tin oxide. This conductive layer forms a microscopic grid across the entire screen. Think of it like graph paper, except it's completely transparent and far too small for you to see. The touchscreen controller continuously sends electrical signals through this invisible grid. As those signals move through the conductive network, they create tiny electrical fields across the surface of the display. The controller instantly monitors those fields, checking every row and every column hundreds or even thousands of times per second. And the screen is basically standing there like a suspicious security guard asking, did something change? Did something change? Did something change? Hundreds of times every second. Most of the time, of course, the answer is no. Then your finger shows up and the screen immediately goes, aha, somebody touched something. Because your body conducts electricity, your finger slightly disturbs the electric field beneath it. The change is incredibly small, but it's enough for the touchscreen controller to detect. The controller notices a change in something called capacitance. Capacitance is simply the ability of a system to store an electrical charge. When your finger gets close to the conductive grid, it changes the capacitance at that specific location. The controller detects the change, calculates the coordinates, and immediately tells the operating system where the touch occurred. All of this happens in milliseconds, far faster than you or I could perceive. Now, here's where things become even more impressive, is that modern touchscreens don't just detect one finger, of course. They can detect multiple fingers simultaneously. Let's just zoom in, zoom out. This capability is known as multi-touch. And one of the reasons modern smartphones feel so natural to use now is because of multi-touch. And here's where it gets wild. Detecting one finger is impressive. Detecting two fingers is impressive. Detecting 10 fingers simultaneously while somebody aggressively pinches, zooms, swipes, rotates, and generally abuses the screen like they're trying to negotiate with Google Maps, that's a completely different level of engineering. The touchscreen controller isn't simply detecting touches. It's continuously tracking multiple changes in the electric field and feeding that information to software, which interprets those movements as commands. At this point, people often ask an interesting question. If touchscreens work using electricity, why can't I use a regular pen? And the answer is simple. Most pens aren't conductive. You get a stylus for that. It's a special material. Your finger works because it interacts with the electric field. A plastic pen doesn't create the same effect, so the touchscreen doesn't recognize it. That's why capacitive styluses contain conductive materials specifically designed to mimic the electrical properties of your finger. The touchscreen isn't looking for pressure, it's looking for electrical interaction. That also explains why touchscreens sometimes struggle when you're wearing gloves. And if you've ever stood outside in the winter angrily stabbing at your phone while wearing gloves, now you know why. So your touchscreen, your glove, might as well be a potato as far as it's concerned. The screen is looking for an electrical interaction. Instead, it gets, I don't know what this thing is, but it's sure isn't a finger. Some gloves solve the problem by incorporating conductive fibers into the fingertips, allowing the electrical interaction to pass through. To the touchscreen, those gloves look much more like a normal finger. And here's something that most people didn't even realize. Not all touchscreens work the same way. The touchscreen on your smartphone is probably a capacitive touchscreen, but older systems often relied on a different technology called resistive touch. And resistive touchscreens used two conductive layers separated by a tiny gap. When you pressed the screen, those layers physically touched each other. The system measured the location of that contact point and interpreted it as a touch. The advantage was that almost anything could activate the touch screen. A finger, a stylus, a gloved hand, even a pen. The downside was it didn't have as much accuracy. It also had reduced durability and a less responsive user experience. And that's why capacitive technology eventually became dominant. It's faster, more accurate, more durable, and supports multi-touch gestures. And now let's connect this to something many businesses encounter every day: interactive conference room displays. The interesting thing about large format touch displays is that they're using the same basic principles as your smartphone. A smartphone might have a 6-digit display. A conference room display might be 86 inches or larger. I'm sorry, I said 6-digit display, 6-inch display. Yet the system is still monitoring a conductive grid, still detecting changes in capacitance, and still calculating touch locations in real time. The challenge is simply doing it across a much larger surface area. This is also why interactive conference room displays impress people during demos. Somebody walks into a room, the presenter writes on the screen, zooms a document, annotates a spreadsheet, moves content around, and everybody nods like, wow, technology. Meanwhile, there's an army of electronics, sensors, controllers, firmware, and software working overtime just to make sure Bob from accounting can draw a crooked rectangle during the quarterly meeting. Well, many enterprise displays even can track multiple users simultaneously, allowing several people to write, draw, annotate, and collaborate all at the same time. And the technology has become remarkably sophisticated, but the underlying principle remains surprisingly simple: detect a change, measure the location, interpret the action, respond instantly. That's the magic of touchscreens. And I think that's what makes engineering so fascinating. The technologies we use every day seem simple on the surface, but when you look underneath, you discover layers of physics, electronics, software, material science, manufacturing, and engineering all working together to create an experience that feels effortless. The thing I love about technology is that once you understand it, the magic doesn't disappear. It actually gets more impressive, because now you realize how many engineers had to solve many problems just so you could angrily text somebody from the grocery store. Thousands of incredibly smart people solving incredibly complicated problems so the rest of us can poke a piece of glass and complain that the Wi-Fi is slow. And that's kind of beautiful. The next time you tap your phone, start a meeting from a conference room panel, sign for a package, use a self-checkout kiosk, or interact with an airport terminal, remember what's actually happening. You're not pressing a button. You are changing an electric field. And a tiny computer is measuring that change hundreds of thousands of times every second, translating it into actions, commands, and information almost instantly. That's pretty incredible when you stop and think about it. And if there are other technologies you use every day that you've always wondered about, let me know. I enjoy breaking down the engineering behind the tools and systems we often take for granted. Anyway, I'm Nomadic IT, and as always, I hope this helps.